Mudavadi, why I can't work with Ruto. Back you, no way. ANC leader claims DP is one of the chief architects of the economic crisis subjecting country to huge foreign debt. And a quote from Mudavadi, Ruto and Jubilee are the problem in this country, and now, by seeking my support, he implies that I be part of the problem. That's not possible. Mark, this is coming from a person whose Secretary General had said that probably they might work together, Mudavadi and Ruto, in terms of, the other team that will come up with another question against the BBI movement that's coming in. Double speak even from his camp this early?
Of course, double speak, because one of the things that Mudavadi has to do is he's got to test the waters. I think he's learned from past experience that, number one, he can't go it alone. If he goes it alone, then Raila beats him in Vihiga as well, and that's the problem. So he's got to test the waters, and he's got to keep giving out mixed signals so that he leaves a lot of doors open for himself come 2022. So that's what he's doing. It's classic Kenyan politics. You remember there was a time we said that Ruto and Uhuru can never work together, and they worked together. Right. We said that, after how Kalonzo was betrayed, he would never come near Raila, but he seems to be Raila's darling. So the politics of today and the reality of politics in 2022 is that no one can stand by himself and expect to win that presidency. Not William Ruto, not Raila Odinga, not nobody, at least not in a first round formation, and even in a second round you're talking about a coalition. So the truth is he is blowing hot and cold as far as this thing is concerned, but he's right on one thing. One of the things that we keep forgetting is that for William Ruto, he will go into 2022 with 10 years of Jubilee on his back, which is something he can't run away from. So it is very critical for William Ruto to realize that the legacy of President Kenyatta is his campaign day one. That's what he needs to realize. The two are inextricably linked. Okay. And trying to delink that might be a fool's errand.
Ben, let me bring you in on this, because one thing that Mudavadi has been speaking about time and time again is the fact that the loans that this government has taken are taking us to, the hole right now, taking us to the dogs. And it's been something I think that's going to be probably his key campaign thrust moving forward. And now he's putting the blame at Ruto's doorstep as far as the debt is concerned. Shouldn't he be escalating it higher to where the buck stops?
On the one hand, I completely agree with Mudavadi on the issue of the economy. The reality is that Jubilee has sunk us into a hole that will take us a very long time to recover from, especially the loans. As you have seen, actually, right now, every Kenyan owes 100,000 shillings in debt. Right. If we have 50 million of us, because our debt already is approaching actually, it's already in excess of 6 trillion shillings. So that means, I really agree with Mudavadi on that. But on the flip side, I think Mudavadi really overrates himself. So I don't understand why it should even be a headline that he can't work with Ruto. Mudavadi does not exist in Kenyan politics. That's a reality. Even in his own Vihiga backyard, count the number of MPs and MCAs and governors he has across the country. So he works, or he has this illusion, or is it a delusion about what he thinks he is rather than what he is? And he needs to work harder in terms of improving his political clout and standing in this country. And mark you, wait for the Kibra by-elections, and we can be able to see what Mudavadi is in this country. It doesn't exist in Kenyan politics.
Let me bring you on this as well, because as Ben says that Mudavadi is overrated, with Siasa Place, I'm sure you do a lot of work with the youth and younger people. And Mudavadi has always been touting himself as the safe pair of hands, to take this country and economy to the next level. Might we see a point where, as Ben says, this person is a non-issue in the political race? Might he be the one that the youth might just turn to and surprise everybody?
Well, I wouldn't say he's a complete non-issue. We do have members who are part of ANC, very vibrant, actually know a few of the Youth League and Secretary Generals, and they are very passionate about Mudavadi. And every time that we talk about politics, he is actually looked at as the alternative. Some do say that they wish he was more confrontational when it came to political issues. He tends to be very lukewarm. And that's not our politics. You take a stance. Even though you flip-flop often, you take a stance. And Mudavadi does not play that card. But I do think when it comes to it, at the end of the day, whoever is on the ballot, when we measure who is the who's the best of the West, Mudavadi actually might have a better chance than a lot of several people who could be next to him in that ballot.
Right. Yeah. And of course, that makes it the front page of the People Daily this morning. I will move on to the Daily Nation's front page. It's the same story right there. Mudavadi rules out 2022 poll pact with Ruto. But interestingly, on the back page of the Daily Nation, counties mile referendum drive for more cash. Of course, this coming from the fact that governors are considering launching their own initiative to push for increased funding and power. So at this particular point, every group, every person who feels aggrieved, looking for a way to get their push into this particular movement as well and see if they can push their question as far as the referendum is concerned. Nerima, let me come back to you on this one as we go through this. They want to have the Ugatuzi initiative to be the vehicle with which they'll push for referendum change right now. Is this something that the citizens are benefiting from? Because even as you look at the fact that they want their allocation from 15 to 45%, but where is the money in all of this? We've had very many people. We've had the BBI. We saw how that came about. You know, we've had Punguza Mzigo. We've seen how that came about. Now we have the Council of Governors. People don't feel like there's any grassroots, initiative that's bringing up the question that, citizens want answered.
Exactly. I know the one who's extremely passionate about Ugatuzi is actually Governor Kivutha Kibwana, but we've also been able to see the work that he's been doing in Makueni County with public participation and services, even such as health. I do think that services are needed in the county. Right now, they're completely underfunded. Devolution is underfunded. But also for us to question whether measures of accountability are being enforced. And that's the key question today. Because when we talk about our resources, we don't have much. So with the little that we do have, our governors need to be looking at avenues or ways of being able to use the little that they're given. To whom much is given, much is required. But that's not the conversation we're having. Right now, we're just concerned about, can I have more money? But we're not talking about, with the little that I do have, this is what we're going to be able to do in the grassroots. I think that a lot of people do not quite understand devolution, and the fact that it's also linked to not only access to health, it's also agriculture, which is also means food security, which is the big four. So it should be supported, but I do think that there need to be other mechanisms when it comes to following that support.
Right. And even as we talk about that, let me bring in Ben on this one as well, because we're looking at a situation where, yes, we're talking about a county government that feels it needs more resources, but yet we look at the absorption rate of the county governments, very much wanting in that regard. So do you really need more money, or should we have a referendum question on how we get more accountability from each and every one of you?
Jeff, my take is, from the outset, we need to remove from the minds of Kenyans that referendums and constitutional reviews solve anything. As I indicated the other day, we are suffering from a chronic moral crisis in this country. And that is where the problem is. So this idea of all the times we are looking at solutions from pieces of legislation is not working. It has not worked for the couple of years we've been attempting it, and it will never solve anything, actually. It is a good thing to really look at the institutional frameworks that we are living in and the legal setups. But in the long run, we have to begin to interrogate ourselves critically, because, as you are speaking correctly, we have a crisis in terms of absorption of funds at the county level. We have a crisis in terms of utilization of funds at the national level. And you remember the other day we were talking about the ongoing war on corruption. One of the key things that comes to the fore is that even as the Auditor General is retiring, there is a crisis in terms of accountability. Those are not issues that can be addressed by reviewing the Constitution or even by changing laws. What we critically need is first to start interrogating the character of individuals we are electing into office. That should be the first step, because, as I indicated, there is nothing wrong with the Constitution as it is today. There isn't. Nobody has come back to tell us that I am unable to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4 because this Constitution is prohibiting. So what we are being treated to is escapist theatrics, whereby even the governors who are insisting on more funding are running away from accountability. Let them come back and tell us, you know what, I've been able to do this number of roads or this number of hospitals, but if I had an extra 10% or 15%, I know I could have done more. But as it is, actually, we have counties that are consuming even up to in excess of 70% on recurrent expenditure. That is not the direction we want to go.
Mark, this thing has been brought and turned into a different monster altogether, this referendum, being that, as Ben has rightly put it, it almost seems like once we have the referendum done, we are home and dry. All our debts have been, cleared. Corruption is, sorted from that particular point in time. For the politicians, this definitely makes for huge political fodder. For a country moving forward, though, is it a referendum that we need, or we just need to implement a constitution that we have?
First, let me just say this. Number one, there is no constitutional crisis in this country. What we have is a bunch of very bad people in government and out of government. Listen, if you bring Washosho and Wanugu and you put them together in a room and you tell them, sign this document that says you will behave very well, what is the chances they'll implement it? The chances are zero. Because if the morality is lacking, then the first thing they will do immediately they read the new constitution is find loopholes, which is what happened with our 2010 constitution. When they read chapter 6, they said, the best way to implement chapter 6 is a self-declaration form. So Mark Bichachi wants to run for MP. He is asked, are you a thief? No. Would you ever think of stealing? No. And that's it. IBC is okay with your self-declaration. That's how we implemented chapter 6. So it does not matter what quality of ink and what quality of English you use to write a new constitution, for as long as you're writing it to a morally bankrupt society. And that's our problem.
So
not
how
even
do we
at
deal
the
with that, Mark?
But that's why one of the key things that we need to do in the fight against corruption, it is a good thing to see Sonko grilled for 10 hours. It makes good TV. Right. But the policeman, okay, who didn't show up to work, the teacher who did not meet the hours required to teach the students, the civil servant whose coat is hanging in the office instead of working, that person too must begin to answer. Number two, the issues of wastage in government. You see, you cannot say that you're not corrupt, but instead of buying 2 ink cartridges, you'll buy an entire carton of cartridges because you have a deal with the supplier. So we need to deal with the moral fiber that constitutes being Kenyan. You understand? The moment a Kenyan does not want to queue, that is what is wrong with this country. The moment a Kenyan wants to overlap instead of driving correctly, that's the problem with this country. Look, if you go to this nation, right, and you're talking about the next people in line in leadership are probably the middle class, yes? These guys who are driving SUVs on loan, correct? They're the ones most likely to overlap. They're the ones most likely to insult you if you correct them in traffic. Then that's the person you want to be a president for 7 years without during a referendum. You tell me, if he's pissing on all of us now, what will he do to us when he gets to State House?
It's interesting, Mark, because even as you point that out, we'll move on to the front page of the Standard. And, you know, as people say, we've seen, you know, people high in government and high levels of government, you know, get away with, you know, corruption. Yes. And it seems like that's what trickles down, because on the front page of the Standard, rogue staff disabled CCTV in the 72 million shilling heist, employees of bank and security firm among 20 arrested as investigations show cameras have been switched off during the theft. Now, the reason why I say this is because as this happened last week, if you followed the sentiments that were being, you know, poured out on Twitter, as people saw what happened, most people were almost congratulating these individuals. You know, not a shot was fired, 72 million shillings gotten away with. I wish it was me who was there.
Yes.
That's a sentiment we're having right now from everyone wondering how they can be part of this. Yes. Not condemning the crime, Ben.
Jeff, I'll still reference you back to a research that was done, I think last year, by my friend Dr. Alex Awiti at the East African Institute of the Aga Khan University. And the research findings are very interesting, that the average youth in this country has got no qualms at all with giving a bribe or receiving a bribe or actually being in a position that they can be able to earn without working. That's the culture that we have been able to build over time in this country, whereby the average person is convinced that there is no way you can make it without stealing. We have seen it from, and in fact, this is a drive that has deliberately been driven by people who work in the civil service, whereby people have continued to amass an monumental wealth that cannot match to their salaries. So even in this particular case, these were primarily police officers, and we have been on the front line actually discussing or highlighting the plight of the average police officer in this country. And the reality is that they live, most of them live in squalor and in very deplorable conditions, and their salaries do not match the expectations that we have on them. So in the long run, we have pushed the populace into a situation whereby shortcuts seem to be the only way out. And this is no exception, actually. This happens all the time. Go even to private companies whereby anybody who finds a small opportunity to steal, they will, because that is the kind of a culture that we have created. We have also created a culture whereby hard work is punished, where merit does not actually count, but where craftiness is the in thing. That's why even the caliber of individuals we end up with, especially in elected positions, are the embodiment of these kinds of characteristics.
Right.
Unless we have an overhaul of the way we have culturalized ourselves, it is going to be a long walk in the park.
Right, yes. And of course, Nerima, I'll bring you in on this one as well, because another aspect of this particular case was the fact that, yes, even as this goes on, over the weekend, 8 suspects, I believe, were apprehended by the police, 7 million shillings also found. And the question started coming up as well in various fora. Okay, fine, only 7 million shillings. Have the games already begun as to the rest of the money?
I know. And even I saw some comments on social media. Some were like, why would you go and get a Subaru with all that money? But I think that the interesting thing is how quick our law enforcement works in particular situations. Because here we are watching cases of politicians that drag on for years. And even from the previous story where we just talked about Governor Sonko, and him might having to step aside for investigations and have a deputy. Highly unlikely that will happen, because how many governors have we seen with court cases still waiting on the results of those court cases? But even so, when we talk about young people, the statistics that Ben has just mentioned, in a society where good is not rewarded, why would you do good?
Right.
Why would you? If I've heard people who have started businesses and just because they didn't file taxes, even though their businesses had zero profits, they have fines of up to 160,000 shillings in 1 year. I have someone who had a business in 3 months and had a fine of 90,000 shillings. So it's very difficult, even when you do try to do the right thing, when you do try to even employ people and start a business, it's made difficult.
Right.
So even it's back to our institutions, it's back to systems, it's back to law enforcement, it's back to the corruption in our institutions. And it's very difficult for me to understand how you expect a society of young people to behave differently when the environment they live in is toxic.
Okay. And of course, that's an issue that we'll have to be talking about right here. We'll have to take a short break at this particular point. We're back on the other side, talking plenty more. The Kibra by-elections now, of course, ready. Campaign starts from today all the way up until November the 7th. We talk about that. Also, Governor Mike Sonko squarely in the crosshairs of the EACC. What happens if he does have to step aside? He should have appointed a deputy governor, or at least named one last week Friday. That did not happen. What does that mean for the county of Nairobi? And also church and politics, two things that shouldn't mix, but we saw what happened yesterday as Kieleweke and Tangatanga, of course, clashed at a church in Moranga. We talk about that and plenty more right here as we go through the newspaper review. As always,